Hello everybody, welcome back to another video with Lim Reviews. Now in today's video, we're going to be checking the brand new Galaxy A33 5G that I just managed to get my hands on. Now first things first, when I first actually got the box, I was super surprised at how small the box actually is. Now I did review the A53 a couple of days ago and the box was actually already very small, but when the A33 came, just look at the size guys. It really feels like a toy, but yeah, doesn't matter as long as we are saving a little bit more trees, right? Alright, so now done with that, let's take a look at what this device has to offer, because honestly speaking, I think that if you are thinking about buying the A33 or A53, you might want to go all the way to the end of this video so you can find out which might be the better purchase for you. Now before we begin, of course, if you could just drop a like and sub to the channel, that would be super much appreciated. Thank you everybody. Now let us jump into the video. So first thing we want to talk about here naturally is the price, because price is very important for a device like this. Now in Malaysia, the device is priced at RM1499 and you only get one configuration, that is the 8GB of RAM with 128GB of internal memory. Now as soon as I unbox the device guys, it's very empty in the box. You only get the phone itself and a Type-C cable. Now it's worth mentioning that the Type-C cable over here is the Type-C or Type-C kind. So if you are using an older charger that uses Type-A, you will have to buy a new charger, so you have to spend a little bit more money for that. Now, moving on, let's talk a bit about the design at the back. So the A33 here actually looks identical to the A53. They are literally one-to-one and extremely similar. In fact, I personally cannot tell apart which is the A33 and A53 if I have not really used them. Now, the only difference here is actually in the frame itself, and I think this is where the A33 actually does a better job. So if you notice on the A53, it actually uses this sort of chrome frames on the sides, which actually tends to get a bit oily and slippery after using it for quite some time. But for the A33, I'm very happy to see that we have this fully matte out sort of like stainless steel or aluminum kind of feel on the sides. It just feels so much better than the A53. It feels very premium in hand and it doesn't feel like the more cheaper device compared to the A53. So that is definitely great. Now apart from that, the A33 still maintains the IP67 rating. That means you can submerge the phone into water and you don't have to worry about dust. So again, another thumbs up there for the A33. Now moving on to the front guys, we do have a pretty good display here as well. We do have a 6.4-inch AMOLED display that refreshes at 90Hz. Now apart from that, it is supporting the HDR10 and of course you do have your HD for Netflix. That is also a very important point when buying a new smartphone. Now one more thing that I should also point out here is that the device itself is protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 5, so you don't have to worry about scratches. In fact, it didn't even come with a screen protector on the front. Now if you are wondering what is really the difference between the screens between the A33 and the A53, that is really in terms of the notch at the top. So for here we do have this sort of like water drop kind of notch, which doesn't really look very awesome, and at the bottom here you do still have a fair bit of chin. But honestly speaking, after using the device for a couple of days now, you don't really tend to notice all this kind of stuff. Overall, I would say that the display is still a great display there. I noticed that the colors were also quite nice, a little bit nicer than the one on the A53, very smooth and nothing to complain about with the A33. Now moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about the cameras at the back. So we do have a quad camera setup here, which does look very similar to the A53, but it is actually a little bit different. Now we do have a 48MP main sensor, an 8MP ultra wide, a 5MP macro lens, and a 2MP depth sensor. Now naturally, I took the phone out and took a couple of pictures. Now pictures taken during the day look quite alright. It's not as good as the A53, but if you don't put the pictures side by side, you won't really notice the difference. I noticed that again in broad daylight, the A33 tend to oversaturate some of the pictures. Everything looks a little bit more saturated compared to what you see with your eyes. So this has been the trend with most of the Samsung Galaxy A series smartphones that I've been seeing to date. Now in terms of night mode, it actually does a pretty decent job. Of course, again, not as good as the one on the A53, but still very respectable for this kind of price point. It was able to brighten a very dark image and actually produce night shots with minimal noise. So again, I'm still quite okay with the camera quality coming out from the Galaxy A33. Now moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about the performance. Now performance-wise, it is using the same processor as the one on the A53. So what that means is that we still have the Exynos 1280 processor, which is very efficient and not as powerful as the 778. However, at the price point of RM1499, having this processor on this A33 is not as bad as it being on the A53. Now let me share with you my personal user experience on the A33. So far on the daily, if you're using apps like you're browsing your social media, browsing the internet and all that, launching apps was actually fairly quick. We did not face any delays or lags or stutters or anything on the A33. Everything was actually quite smooth. I had a very smooth experience on my daily applications. Now when it comes to gaming, this is where you might actually want to think twice. So if you're going to play light games like Mobile Legends, a couple of racing games and Subway Surfers, all these kind of basic games actually run very well without any issues as well. Now I did take the temperature gun and shot at the A33, and after like 20 to 30 minutes of gaming, I noticed that the temperature was also kept at a very manageable temperature of about 38 degrees Celsius. However, if you do want to play games like Genshin Impact, which is very graphic intensive, the graphics will actually be a little bit more taxing on the processor itself, and the temperatures will rise slightly higher to approximately 41 or even 42 degrees Celsius. Now it's still not super hot to touch and all that, maybe because of the plastic back panel, but this is just something that I wanted to point out. Obviously, I also did a very quick benchmark test here, so I'm going to show you the scores of the Geekbench 5, which surprisingly actually was a little bit higher than the one on the A53, and I'm also going to show you a very quick Wild Rift benchmark score. The stress test here shows that the processor itself is very consistent over the multiple loops. So what the stress test really does is that it runs this very high graphic intensive video over a couple of loops to show how consistent is the performance, and surprise, surprise, it is actually quite consistent on the Galaxy A33. So that's just a couple of references in case you are wondering of purchasing the A33. Alright, so now done with the performance, let's talk a little bit about the speakers, because we do have some pretty awesome sounding speakers. Now the Galaxy A33 here does not come with a headphone jack, but it does come with that dual stereo speakers. So the dual stereo speakers here actually sound great. They actually sound very loud and very similar to the one on the A53, which was quite good already. So definitely a plus point there for the A33. Now moving on, we want to talk a little bit about the battery in the back. So similar to the elder brother, again the A33 here does come with a 5000 mAh battery, which honestly speaking lasts pretty long. I've been doing a lot of stuff, throwing a lot of videos, games on the A33 here, and it has managed to pull through a full day without any issues, even with about 20% remaining at the end of the day. Now charging speeds wise, it only supports 25 watts, and again I do not have that charger in the room, so I have to use my other chargers, and it charges up very slowly. I think Samsung really needs to boost their charging speeds. That's just my personal opinion, but it's just a bit slow on the A33 here. Alright guys, so at the end of the day, is this A33 something that you should actually consider? Should you buy the A53, or should you even go for last year's A52s? That's always the golden question, right? Well, if you want something new today, I would say that if I had to choose between the A33 and the A53, I would save a couple of bucks, about 400 ringgit here, and actually get the A33. Almost everything is similar to the A53. The only downside here is that you only have 90 Hz compared to 120 Hz refresh rate. The cameras at the back are not as good as the one on the A53, but otherwise everything else is the same. At the end of the day, it really depends on you. If your budget is approximately 1,500 and you just want like the best mid-range smartphone, I think you can definitely consider the A33 5G here. This guy here is a very solid performer. However, if you want a bit more performance and you don't mind using last year's phone, go ahead and check out the Samsung Galaxy A52s, because that's still a killer device. Otherwise guys, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed today's video and learned something from here today. Don't forget to drop a like and sub to the channel if you want to see more content like this. And once again, thank you for staying with me till the end. Do stay safe everybody. Take care. Bye bye.